Have you ever felt heartbroken by news from home? Maybe you were far away, living your life, when you heard that something precious had been damaged, neglected, or lost. That is exactly how Nehemiah felt. Nehemiah lived hundreds of miles away from Jerusalem. He worked as a trusted servant to the king of Persia, one of the most powerful rulers in the world. From the outside, Nehemiah had a comfortable life. He had a good position, security, and respect. But deep in his heart, he still cared about his people and the city of Jerusalem. One day, some visitors arrived from Judah. Nehemiah eagerly asked them about Jerusalem and the people who had returned there after years of captivity. The answer broke his heart. They told him that the walls of Jerusalem were still broken down and its gates had been burned by fire. The city that once represented God's blessing and protection was lying in ruins. When Nehemiah heard this news, he sat down and wept. He mourned for several days. He fasted and prayed, pouring out his heart to God. Nehemiah did not start by blaming others. He did not complain about how difficult the situation was. Instead, he turned to God first. He prayed, asking God to hear his cry, remember his promises, and help his people. For months, Nehemiah carried this burden in his heart. Then one day, while serving wine to the king noticed that Nehemiah looked sad. "Why do you look so troubled?" the king asked. Nehemiah was afraid because appearing sad before the king could be dangerous. But he gathered his courage and explained the situation. "How can I be happy when the city of my ancestors lies in ruins?" he replied. To Nehemiah's surprise, the king showed compassion. "What do you want?" the king asked. Nehemiah quickly prayed in his heart and then boldly shared his request. He asked for permission to travel to Jerusalem and rebuild its walls. Even more amazingly, the king agreed. He provided letters for safe travel and supplies for the rebuilding project. Nehemiah knew that this was not simply good fortune. He believed that God was opening the way before him. When Nehemiah arrived in Jerusalem, he quietly inspected the damaged walls during the night. The destruction was worse than he had imagined. Huge sections were broken down. Gates were destroyed. Rubble lay everywhere. The task seemed impossible. But Nehemiah refused to be discouraged. He gathered the people and said, "Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem." His words inspired hope. Families, workers, priests, merchants, and ordinary citizens came together. Each person took responsibility for a section of the wall. Stone by stone, they began rebuilding what had been broken for years. Not everyone supported their efforts. Their enemies mocked them and laughed at them. "What are these weak people doing?" they sneered. "Do they really think they can rebuild this wall?" Soon the mocking turned into threats. Enemies plotted to stop the work and spread fear among the people. Many would have given up under such pressure. But Nehemiah stood firm. He prayed for strength, encouraged the workers, and organized protection. Some people worked with building tools in one hand and weapons in the other. They remained alert, determined, and focused on their mission. Day after day, despite fear, exhaustion, and opposition, the people continued building. Then something incredible happened. In only 52 days, the wall was completed. The city that had once been exposed and vulnerable now stood strong again. When their enemies saw what had been accomplished, they realized that God had helped his people achieve what seemed impossible. Yet rebuilding the wall was only part of Nehemiah's mission. He understood that a restored city meant little if the hearts of the people remained distant from God. So he gathered the people to hear God's word. As it was read aloud, many began to weep. They realized how far they had drifted from God's ways. But Nehemiah encouraged them not to remain trapped in sorrow. "Do not grieve," he said. "The joy of the Lord is your strength." Those words brought hope to the people. Instead of living in guilt and regret, they turned back to God with renewed faith, gratitude, and commitment. The story of Nehemiah is not simply about rebuilding walls. It is about rebuilding faith, restoring hope, and trusting God during difficult times. It reminds us that prayer should be our first response, not our last resort. It teaches us that ordinary people working together can accomplish extraordinary things. It shows us that opposition does not mean we are failing, sometimes it is evidence that we are moving in the right direction. Most importantly, Nehemiah's story reminds us that God specializes in restoring what has been broken. Whether it is a city, a family, a relationship, a dream, or a life, God can rebuild what seems impossible to repair. Nehemiah began as a man with a broken heart, weeping over the ruins of Jerusalem. But through faith, courage, prayer, and perseverance, he became part of God's plan to restore an entire nation. His story continues to inspire people today because it reminds us that no situation is beyond God's power to restore. No ruin is too great. No challenge is too overwhelming. And sometimes, the first step toward a miracle begins when one person cares enough to stand up, trust God, and say, "Let us rebuild."